Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians on the move again. Rafah, where the IDF's been warning for weeks it's poised to invade. But where is truly safe? The fear is real. 21 members of the same family killed overnight. This funeral isn't in Rafah, it's miles away in Deir al-Balah. Still no ceasefire. Across Gaza, the entire population is effectively trapped between the IDF and Hamas.
Here they are, in pieces. Here's my sister-in-law without a head. My aunt is without a head. What is this injustice? Until when will this be going on? We are exhausted, by God, we are exhausted.
When and how will this end? Israel says it won't stop until Hamas is defeated. Yet, in places, Hamas appears to have regrouped. The Israeli military's expanded its evacuation orders for Rafah. Several more neighborhoods are being told to leave. More than 150,000 people have already fled the city to what the IDF calls an expanded humanitarian zone on the coast. But further north, they've now said parts of Gaza City must re-evacuate. The IDF says Hamas has reassembled in and around Jabalia. So residents are being told to leave again and head for shelters to the west. 7 months of fighting and nearly 35,000 Palestinians have been killed. Over 100 Israeli hostages still missing. Hamas saying this afternoon that 51-year-old Brit Nadav Popplewell is now dead. It claims killed by an Israeli airstrike. Israeli ground troops in Rafah are already in close combat with Hamas, according to the IDF. But at the UN and in capitals across the world, Israel's under increasing diplomatic pressure to change strategy. The UN General Assembly voting last night to give Palestine enhanced rights. Israel is defiant, though.
Yes, that's what you're doing, shredding the UN Charter.
Their ambassador to the UN furious.
Shame on you.
So the focus turns to Israel's key ally. What is Washington's next move? Consider Israel's use of American bombs. Have they broken human rights law? A long-awaited State Department report released last night came very close to saying yes. Driven by campus protests and a growing unease in the Democrat base about Israel's pursuit of Hamas.
How you respond matters. And when you use a 2,000-pound bomb to go after one member of Hamas and kill 100 or more people, that is not consistent with international law.
In Israel tonight, hostage families begging for the war to stop.
Entering Rafah and expanding the operations there are both hinder the hostages release negotiation and put the hostages' lives in grave danger.
And in Rafah, another exodus. Where will they end up?
Kemi and Zaram reporting. Mossab Nasser runs an American medical charity working in Gaza. 2 weeks ago, he arrived in Rafah with 17 medical staff working at the European hospital. Today, he's overseen their evacuation from the safe house they've been using, which is in one of the areas the Israeli military has ordered people to leave. I spoke to him earlier and asked how that evacuation went.
In terms of evacuation, the European hospital itself has not been ordered to evacuate. However, the bombs were falling within a 500-meter radius from our supposedly safe house that is actually no longer safe. And that's why we decided to move the team of 17. We have 12 Americans, 3 Brits, and 1 from Egypt and 1 from Oman. Spent the night last night here at the European hospital, and we woke up this morning with the news that the area where our safe house is has been ordered to evacuate. So effectively, we evacuated before the evacuation orders because we could not tolerate the bombings that was taking place even before the orders of evacuation.
The Israel Defense Forces say they're asking people to move from these areas to reduce civilian casualties. They say this is temporary while they carry out these operations. Is that what you're seeing on the ground?
The word evacuation sounds very gentle, to be honest with you. What we've seen is really but we have experience ourselves. We were forced to evacuate without evacuation orders. Our block, where we were staying in Rafah, was not under evacuation until yesterday. But we had no choice but to evacuate because bombs were falling even west of us, which we are supposed to be in the eastern central part of Rafah, which was not supposed to be bombed. But bombs were falling way even west of Rafah, which made us feel very concerned. Me as a CEO of the organization, very much concerned about the safety of my team.
We're seeing reports about aid not being able to get through to certain areas. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And what's happening in the hospital that you're working in?
When we talk about aid, there are different types of aid. For us, what really most important is medical aid. We don't see that. We don't have that. In fact, when we came to Gaza on April 29th, we had to carry our own suitcases full of medical supplies and wound care and orthopedic implants and everything for us to be useful when we come here. When we came to the hospital, none of that really exists. The hospital runs on a very thin kind of line of supplies that without the things we bring, we would be useless here.
Dr. Nasser, what do you think the next few days hold? What are you concerned about? What are you most worried about?
This trickling expansion of the military operation in Rafah concerns us. I really hope that we can get our team out of Gaza as soon as possible, out of Rafah as soon as possible. And I really hope for the safety of the people of Gaza. What we have seen in the last few days, the casualties that have made it to the hospital were heartbreaking. We don't see war, to be honest with you. We don't see war. We see madness. We see families being wiped out. We see families rushed to the ER, mother, father, children, boys and girls screaming and bleeding. We don't see, I've been here for over 10 days with my team. We have not seen a single combatant coming to the hospital. We haven't seen anyone that looks like a military person. We see families, and that's really heartbreaking. I just can't imagine us leaving tomorrow or next week when whatever the border crossing opens and we have an opportunity to exit and leaving these families behind, stranded. On top of that, the chaos that we will actually instill and the fear that we will instill in the hearts of the locals when we leave is also concerns us because they think that we know more than what they know. And if we leave, it means, things will go south.
Mohsen Nasser, thank you very much for joining us. It sounds like a really difficult situation for you and your team, and I hope you are keeping safe.
Thank you.
I've also been speaking to Aaron David Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former State Department diplomat. I asked him what he thinks the Biden administration is privately saying about Israel's military expansion in Rafah.
Well, the president's already indicated that he's paused one shipment of high payload munitions, but also continued $14 billion in an emergency national security supplemental to Israel, along with $60 billion to Ukraine. They also have another $780 million of weaponry in the pipeline that the Israelis are going to receive. So this is not an arms embargo by any means. It's a signal. It's a cautionary note. The president has basically said that there would be further pauses, maybe even restrictions on Israeli military assistance if, in fact, the Israelis go ahead on this. So, guess that's the real question. Will the Israelis stay below what the administration perceives to be its red line? And precisely what is the administration's red line? And neither of those things are crystal clear.
I wonder what you think is going to happen next, because there was a statement today from the IDF saying that they're going back into an area that was already cleared.
Well, the Israelis now are faced with a problem. They've cleared many areas in northern and central Gaza, but Hamas has begun to resurge. And unlike Americans in Iraq or Afghanistan, where the strategy was to clear, hold, and build, the Israelis can clear, certainly, but it's hard for them to hold, and they don't want to build. I take them at face value. They don't want to occupy Gaza forever. But at the same time, the Netanyahu government has refused to engage on anything that you and I would consider significant post-war planning. What happens, even if they do destroy Hamas's organized structure as a military force? Who takes over?
That report late on Friday night in the UK time, which said it was reasonable to assess US weapons have been used, which is in a manner that is inconsistent with international humanitarian law. It did also say that Hamas shields behind civilian populations. What did you make of that report?
On one hand, it's the most critical report of how the Israelis have behaved since the better part of these 7 months, up until I think April was the cutoff date. But on the other hand, the administration clearly, and no administration that I had worked for, Republican or Democrat, wanted to get into a situation where they are forced legally or even politically to restrict or end America's military assistance to Israel. You've seen the pushback now on the part of Republicans who are accusing the administration of betrayal. They're trying to navigate an impossible line to navigate.
And where does this leave the Biden administration? As you said, Republicans say he's too weak. Democrats on his left flank also say he's too weak. And the election's coming up very soon.
I mean, there is one way out, which is an Israeli-Hamas negotiation that leads to release of the hostages in exchange for 6-7 weeks of pause. You could build on that conceivably to surge humanitarian assistance, get hostages out, and de-escalate Israeli military activity. But we don't seem to be able to produce that, in large part, the Biden administration, that is, because the Israelis and the Israeli government and Hamas have other objectives.
And just finally, do you think that the Israeli government is just essentially waiting for Donald Trump to get in because his administration will have a different view on this?
That certainly could be the objective of the prime minister. But clearly, Netanyahu probably believes, and he must stay in power, because if he loses power, he's on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court. He's going to either face a conviction or most likely a plea bargain, which will be the end of his political career. And this man has no intention, I think, given his will to remain in power, to see either one of those outcomes. He'll hang on for as long as he possibly can, and he'll do whatever it takes to hang on.
Aaron David Miller, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Ajay. Thank you for having me.